Okay, so yeah, we opened in 2019, and I loved what Ebony said about like us needing to take action immediately, but also this stuff takes a long time. It takes a long time for young people to build community. And so in 2019, when kids showed up at the first recovery high school, Harmony Academy, on the first day, they were all kind of at the same level, and they weren't sure that it would work for them. And they didn't have any role models, and they didn't really know what recovery meant. So there were a lot of kids that would say, oh yeah, I went to recovery at Madrona for 30 days. And they thought that recovery and treatment were the same thing, and they didn't realize that it's like a lifelong process of building community with people, and it's really an identity. And it takes a little while for that identity to start to sink in and to start to have like really strong peer role models. Because adolescents in recovery need other adolescents in recovery to believe that it works. As strong as I think my message might be, they really hear it from each other. That's who they hear it from. So I just want to share that. Now we have kids in the Harmony community that, you know, they have peers with 2 years, free from all substances. They're celebrating, they're celebrating each other's 2-week milestones. They're celebrating each other's 1-month milestone. And because they're adolescents, and I know this is not what a lot of mutual aid communities like to see, but they're adolescents, and they will celebrate each other's milestones off drugs of choice. And they will acknowledge, I understand I'm not completely free from substances, but I feel really good that I have this much time free from fill in the blank. The easiest definition of recovery that I heard, we did orientation this week for our 5th year as a recovery high school, 5 years. And when we were doing orientation, I said, does anybody have a working definition of recovery? And there were a few really good ones, and I was with the new group, the group of new students, and somebody said it's just about getting better. And I think there's some wisdom to that. It's not about being good. It's not about, you know, following some kind of rule. It's not about doing anything like that. It's just about kids getting better, and that's going to mean something different for every one of the young people that we work with. I'd also like to, I know Tony Vesnick gets a lot of shout outs because he deserves it. I just want to say, like, the young people have an adolescent community-based recovery organization that they can go to, and it just opened up recently, and they are on fire about it. And so that means when they leave a recovery school at the end of the day, they have somewhere to go to where they're like even more building that identity, and they're having fun. And you'll get to hear from some of the mentors from that later on, so I'm really looking forward to that. So recovery high schools use the definition of recovery from SAMHSA with a little bit of a tweak. So we use the definition abstinence focused. And what that means is that we are not under the illusion that adolescents are safe using small amounts of drugs, using cannabis for sleep. We're not going to co-sign that we think that that's safe for them, because we don't believe that it's safe for them. But we also want to take them from where they are and help them move to where they want to be. So abstinence focus is what we use, and we agreed on that as the Association of Recovery Schools, that was really important to clarify so that we don't end up with like all sorts of definitions that maybe aren't in the best interest of our young people. And so it's a process of change focused on abstinence, on substance use abstinence, through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. And again, young people need places where there aren't drugs readily available. We're kind of in the middle of nowhere where our campus is, and I really like it that way because it just cuts down on the chance that if a young person has a bad day that day, they're going to end up with pills. They're going to end up with, because they can get it so easily. They can get it so, like, I think we underestimate just how easy it is for the kids to get it. Actually, probably the people in this room don't underestimate that. So I just wanted to give you like a little small overview of Harmony. As I said, we opened in 2019, and I pulled up on our student information system how many students have enrolled since 2019, and it was 150 even. So that's 150 students, and some of them are there for multiple years. Like one of our first students went through 3 years and graduated. She started as a sophomore, went through the whole thing, graduated, and now she's working at the other recovery school that has opened across the city in Portland. Last year, our ending enrollment was 56 students. We serve students in Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties, and sometimes kids from Vancouver will come over. We serve 18 different school districts, and we've had graduating classes from 2019 to 2023. So even that first year during the pandemic, we had our first graduating class, and I think that's just testament to the fact that people in recovery adapt and overcome. It's what we're really, really good at, and so we just keep doing that. Let's see here. So this is just the definition of what a recovery school is, and I'm not going to read it off of there, but basically we have 2 tracks that are going on. We are getting kids to graduation, and we are helping them find and maintain recovery in meaningful ways, and around that all is a giant community of love where people come in and they feel a sense of belonging and they want to show up every day. And so I think what's really ingenious about recovery high schools is that, at least here, they're public schools here in Oregon. And across the country, there's a predominance of public schools for recovery high schools. Some of them are private. But what I love about finding kids in the education system is there's compulsory education. They're gonna show up. They're gonna show up, and a lot of times we're gonna find out about what the problems are that they're facing because people see them every day, or they notice that they're missing every day. And so the other really ingenious thing about meeting kids where they're at in public schools is it increases equity. We're focused on getting them a free and appropriate public education. We don't have to dismiss them when they get to the end of treatment. We're not just, working with them for a little while, developing a relationship while they're in this limited program. We get time with them. And because we have such small class sizes, we get to spend a lot of time with them. We get to really know who they are. So, and they choose to go there. I'd also just like to mention that recovery high schools aren't a new thing. They've actually been around for 40 years. And there's 45, I think, right now in the country, with more starting to open all the time. And they're all small communities where people really get to know each other. And I know that this is the prevention, this is a prevention symposium, and I'm glad Annalise brought it up, that, the message for the kids that we work with that, drugs are bad, they missed that message. They missed the message that they shouldn't do drugs for whatever reason. They missed the message when they were expelled from school. They missed the message when they were locked up. This is youth where we're stepping in at the point that they've come to the awareness themselves that drugs are not helping them at all get to where they want to be in life. They've come to that conclusion themselves. They have some ambivalence around it for the most part. I was talking with Tony before we started today, and cannabis is a huge, huge challenge for our young people right now. And it's not just that it stunts their growth and learning. It's not just that they're convinced that it's the thing that's going to help them with trauma when what they really need is help with trauma, not more cannabis use. It's also just that it increases the likelihood that they're gonna go back to using other drugs because the effects of that will wear off. And if that's the solution, and if the solution is taking substances, that remains the solution. And so it's just really hard because the entire outside community that they're in kind of minimizes the risk of cannabis. So I'll get off my soapbox about that. This is a picture of our staff at graduation. I want to give a shout out to Stacy Mahoney, if you could wave to us back there. That's our school therapist. Hi. Yay. We are lucky to have an amazing school therapist. That was something that took a while to get around to. And OHA, I have to say, has been, our school would not exist without OHA. And so that was one of the, of the many, many things that OHA has helped us with, getting a therapist is one of my favorite. Because we're not a therapeutic environment, we're not a clinical space. So what we started to see is that with the dearth of services out there, kids were really coming in with just high acuity, and waiting around to get them seen by somebody that could help them, it just seemed too risky. And so we decided that what we really needed was a clinician on staff. And it makes a huge difference to have that. So I'll go through the rest of just the staffing for this, and then I'll take a look out at recovery schools around us. So we have the administration. I'm a licensed school principal, also a licensed teacher, and this year we have a half-time assistant principal, which I'm really excited about. And part of the need for that in such a small school is that I'm the person that does the grant writing, I'm the person that does human resources, hiring, and recovery schools tend to be like that. It's, wear all the different hats and make it happen, And so we want to make sure that there's enough admin to really spend time with the kids, because we have an open door policy, and I'll get to more of why that's important later, but I want kids to be able to come to my office and talk to me or Jake, the assistant principal, and be like, hey, I'm noticing that this trend here at the school isn't working. Hey, I'm feeling like this could be safer if. Hey, I want to talk to you about something that I think would be a great field trip. Whatever the kids' ideas are, we want to have somebody there that can talk to them and isn't always like running around dealing with logistics. Then we have our academic team, which is really similar to what you would have in a regular comprehensive high school. Except that it has kind of the one-room schoolhouse feel to it, because kids are grouped together in multiple age classrooms, which I think is a benefit. I just think it's a benefit anytime there's multi-age groups together. We have all licensed teachers. That's something that we've committed to. We are a charter school, so we could have charter registered teachers, but I really feel like sometimes alternative school kids and kids who are struggling end up kind of getting the shaft on who their places are staffed with. And I think it's really important to have high quality educators working with our young people. Our academic team works with a social justice curriculum. They really try to integrate the kids' ideas into what they're learning so that education feels meaningful, because all the youth that we're serving, except probably the freshmen that come in, and that's rare to get freshmen because people usually wait a while, all the kids that we're working with have been behind in credits for the most part. Some kids have missed a couple years of school. Kids have missed school for subsidization, adjudication. They just haven't felt welcome. They've been marginalized. They've been pushed out. They've been, subject to disproportionate discipline. And they just haven't gotten their needs met. So we're re-engaging students that really need to know they can be successful. So having high-quality educators that can differentiate is really important. And then so we have that academic team, and then we have a recovery team. And that's really like the special sauce for a recovery school, because we have peer mentors. We have certified recovery mentors there. And these are people with lived experience that want to work with adolescents, and they're not saying, oh, hey, this is how I do it, this is how you should do it too. They're really listening. They're talking to kids, and they're hearing what their goals are. They're working with them on, like, why are they in recovery? What do they want out of recovery, and how can they help? We also have a recovery services coordinator who helps make sure that that program is flowing well, and our clinician, Stacy, helps with that as well. Just making sure that if a student has a return to use or a recurrence of use, that there's support for them, that families are activated. That's one of the main differences with working with adolescents with substance use, is like the family is usually still a big part of what's going on and the dynamics, and that can be challenging, and it's got strengths that we can draw on too. So, and then for student supports, we have a school counselor. We have a student success specialist, and that's a person that helps with like all the data and all the grant requirements. And then we have our office team, and they're just fantastic. And so getting the right team together is another reason why sometimes it takes a long time to figure out how to serve youth. And so like there's that immediacy, and then there's that what's going to work for youth in the long term. And it's really different, I found, and I won't sidetrack on this, but I find that it's very different than my experience in alternative education. It's a really specific group of young people that end up at a recovery high school. And finding the right staff to deal with them has been, over the past 4 years, has been a lot of the work. And I really, really love the team that we have right now, and I think the young people do too. So. This right here is the result. I don't know if, can you guys see that from where you are? Okay, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna share a little bit of this. We did a research study. We collaborated with Emily Tanner Smith first at U of O to just look at harmony and get some programmatic data. And then we started working with Vanderbilt too, to look at what are the trends in recovery high schools across the country. Because, looking at the 40 students that I have, it gives me some information, and a lot of that information is just kids saying, I love this place, it feels like family, but that's not really data, So it's like we wanted to look at what's happening across the country, and so this is the largest N we've ever gotten. So we have 387 students that responded on this. And I'm just gonna share like a little bit of what we learned. So surprisingly, and I think this is a really good thing, 41% of students who attend recovery high schools across the country are non-white students. The gender split is actually fairly good between boys and girls, and then there's also a lot of kids that are identifying as gender non-binary. In Portland, that's a higher number than it is at a lot of the schools across the country. Just so you know, like at Harmony Academy up in Portland, we're looking at around 2/3 of our students identify as LGBTQ. I think that's great. And that community is getting hit with substance use disorder at over twice the rate of non-LGBTQ students. So it's great that they find a place to belong. It's also terrifying how many of those students have made suicide attempts and dropped out of school and stuff like that. So one of the things that's on this this very hard to read demographic sheet here is that, so we did the Gain Short Screener, and 100% of the students that we're serving at recovery high schools had a high probability of serious problems when measured on the Gain Short Screener. So that tells me that we're serving the right students. One more interesting thing that I'd like to call out from this study, and we'll have more data next year too, but this is the first year we all got it together and participated in this, and so it was exciting. So when asked if they'd done any substances at all in the past 90 days, it was a 49-51% split. So 49% of the students had done drugs in the past 90 days, and 51% had not. And I share that because there's a lot of pushback on being abstinence-focused, but even being abstinence-focused, this is where we're getting. So with all the focus on like, there's just no safe way for you to be using, we're still seeing that it's really hard for adolescents who haven't had maybe the experiences that I had when I went to Buckley to stop completely. And they tend to try, maybe this drug will work, maybe that drug will work, and we're there for them. And we'd rather be there for them than kick them out right away when they decide that maybe they didn't have a problem with alcohol and maybe alcohol will work. And then we get to talk to them when they figure out that alcohol didn't work. I'm just looking at Pam Pierce out there and want to give a call out to Pam Pierce for co-founding this school. And Tony Vesna was another co-founder. And Pam really has a groundswell of the students that don't end up at the recovery high school. And I just want to call that out. She has just this amazing, forceful group of students that are actually not just getting the message, but sharing the message that they just don't want to use substances. And a lot of those kids have family members that are in recovery and or family members that need to be in recovery. And we actually got the two groups of young people together, and it was such a strange encounter between this group of kids that never use drugs and this group of kids who have like really hard experiences with drugs. And what I got out of that encounter, because they did a panel together for Oregon Recovers, what I got out of that panel is that both groups felt alienation. both groups felt like they didn't belong. Both groups just wanted a sense of belonging and authenticity, and it was just really amazing to see that first tier prevention meet that second tier prevention and see how that worked. So yeah, and so Dr. Emily Tanner Smith just put out some research briefs that are awesome on recovery high schools, and she has been looking at the impact of recovery high schools for I don't know how many years. Just like every time I go to look anything up, her name is on the paper. So, but I'm just going to go through just really quickly the benefits. Decreased absenteeism, decreased substance use, increased substance use abstinence, increased graduation rates, and I want to call this one out, 25% increase in graduation rates. That is amazing. And it's not just that the kids aren't using, it's that they have that glue that's sticking them together of people that get them. You know, we have a come as you are sign, you know, over the entrance to our school. And that's the number one thing that kids share about why they keep showing up, is they can show up and have whatever day they're having, and they're gonna belong there. The graduation rate at recovery high schools across the country is 82%. That is amazing because Oregon's graduation rate last year was 81%. So the kids at recovery high schools are succeeding at the same rate that the general population is. Would you see how amazing that is? Yeah, 2 years ago, we had 100% graduation rate for our youth on IEPs. That's a group that's, yeah. And yeah, so I'm gonna go into a darker slide right now. What is your drug of choice? Select all that apply. This is that same 387 kids. They could pick more than one thing. So last year, at the end of the year, I did a survey of the kids. 68% of them had had one or more overdose that required medical attention. Of those 68% that had had an overdose that required medical attention, most of them had had more than one. That's terrifying. And I'll tell you that their ideas about safety over the past 4 years have really changed. I interviewed a student last year who was talking about, you know, well, I ended up in the hospital, I almost died. I thought I was being safe using meth instead of my drug of choice, but the meth all has fentanyl in it. I mean, not all of it, but there's a really good chance that there's gonna be fentanyl in it. So even when kids are trying to be safe, it's hard. It's really hard for them out there. And I would like to call out on this slide that across the country, 24% of the young people that were surveyed at recovery high schools, their drug of choice was whatever's available. I mean, they don't get the luxury of deciding the way that adults do. They'll take whatever's there, and that's really scary. And I also get, you know, I get really sad when, you know, we have students in recovery that have sat up all night on the phone with one of their friends who's still using because they've gotten the message that's gone out there that using alone is dangerous. But it's just really sad when a student's coming in and they stayed up all night to make sure their friend didn't die. You know, and that's something that they're dealing with on a regular basis right now. And so, you know, cannabis, 66%. I mean, that's a lot of work that has to be done. Alcohol's been on the upswing over the past few years that I've been at the recovery school. Alcohol was sort of like gross, you know, but now that kids are trying to be safe, they're drinking more is what we're noticing, and that's how they're reporting it. And then there's just a lot of like pressed pills, other substances, over-the-counter medication, prescription pain pill, and if you add those all up, it's not a great picture. So are there any questions on anything so far? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So one of the best things about a recovery high school is because it's not treatment, we're not just talking about the problem all the time. We don't just sit around going, yeah, I don't do drugs anymore, good, great, I don't do drugs anymore either. We're actually like looking at the things that we want out of life. I keep saying we because a lot of our staff is in recovery. I shared that I am, but like a lot of our staff is, and some of our staff aren't. And it's really nice to have that mixture of people on the staff. That way we're not all sick on the same day. So adolescent recovery capital is one of the really cool things that people are looking at right now. It's a little bit different than adult recovery capital. So I'm gonna go through this really quickly. So there's 4 domains of recovery capital, and recovery capital is basically just all the things that it takes to find and maintain recovery. And so people in this room that are in recovery, think of all the things that you have to do and maintain to keep your recovery going. It's actually a lot of things. It's not just abstaining from drugs. So for human capital, school grades and high school graduation are actually part of that for our young people. And then self-confidence, motivation, spiritual beliefs, things like that are going to overlap with the adult population. But that high school grades and high school graduation, it creates a sense of self-efficacy. A lot of kids come in believing that they're not going to be able to finish high school or even pass their classes, and they are disabused of that notion, and it makes them feel really good. It makes them feel really good to like be able to succeed in algebra. And one of my favorite things is like walking through the school and seeing kids like put up their hand and be like, oh, it's the fucking x-intercept. And you're like, yay. So it's like they're getting the same education as everybody else, and it feeds that sense of self-efficacy. Financial capital is going to be, for most of the youth that we're working with, financial capital is going to have to do a lot with what's going on with their families. And youth that are navigating foster care, that gets a little bit scarier in that financial capital thing, because they're really trying to, build a life for themselves, and there's so many more unknowns. But across the board with the youth that we're working with, they have less direct agency for the most part on finances than adults do. And then social capital, having sober and supportive friends and family, I would say that having sober friends is one of the #1 things that the youth need. Yes, they need treatment to get through the worst of it, but they need fun. And the more research I've read about this, it's just funny to me to like read all this research and be like, so the takeaway from this is that kids need fun. Okay, yeah, they need fun or they won't stay in recovery. It's like really, really important. And so participation in developmentally appropriate groups and group activities. And again, we're going to hear from 4D, and they are just killing it with this. The Association of Recovery Schools, just to let you know, has a whole guidebook of accreditation standards. And one of them that's really important is community partnerships. And I'm not going to read this off, but it's basically like setting up all those networks that extend outside of the school to those meaningful connections with careers, with finding, we have people come in that are in recovery and they share about, what career they chose. And there's people in all sorts of different jobs. I mean, I'm not supposed to be a high school principal, and I am. And there's people with all sorts of careers that come in and share about how they got there. And then there's also people like this picture here is of a group called Push Movement. And Brent Atchley's in this picture, and he was a big-time skateboarder who had to go through recovery. And he comes and does sober skateboarding with the kids on Thursdays. They go to a skate park, they skateboard, they talk recovery. There's dogs sometimes. It's amazing. And so, we don't just need partnerships to support kids with treatment and healthcare. We need partnerships with people that make recovery look good and make it look appealing. And again, that's part of that socio-ecological model. And alternative peer groups are something that typically reinforces a recovery high school. And Pam had the first one in Portland area, FUR, and then there's been other ones since then. We have one at our school now that's like kind of like a low-key APG where we do like 3 days a week of programming. And sometimes we do events like we're going to Punks in the Park in Salem. The kids got invited. Yay! Oh, there you are. The kids got invited to that, and that's going to be fun. I think our little harmony band is playing at at the Walk for Recovery, I think. And so just having alternative peer groups, which is basically a group of sober peers that are having fun, that have mentors, adult mentors around them, and then there's a family component that helps support just, you know, general well-being in the home. Because that's one of the hardest things, I think, for the families that come through. You know, I sit, and the way that we do, I'm just going to share for a second, the way that we do interviews to decide if students come to the school or not, super relational process, where we sit down and we talk as a group. So that's the student, me, our recovery services coordinator, and our therapist or our school counselor. Did I say the family? And then the family or the PO or the DHS worker, whoever that young person's person is. We sit down together and we talk about some like overarching questions. And then Dante, our recovery services coordinator, takes that young person for a walk, just the two of them, because not every adolescent wants to be honest about what's going on when everybody's sitting in the room together with their principal and their parents. And then I get to talk to the families or the PO or the DHS person or the resource parent and just, you know, talk about like what are the things that might help us serve this student that you didn't want to say in front of them. And a lot of times the family that's there is just crying. They're just crying. They're so tired. You know, they've had experiences of taking their kiddo to the emergency room, sitting in the emergency room for hours with a young person with suicidal ideation or a plan. They've sat there in the hospital. They've sat there in the hospital until the young person decided, you know what, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home. And then they take that young person home, and then it's their responsibility to keep that young person safe. And it's terrifying. I mean, the amount of attempts that most of our families have made to get help, only to bring their young person home and have to wait. And while they're waiting, they're worried that they're going to find that young person dead. And so there's a lot of pain. And getting back to the positive, APGs help with that, with having parents be able to talk to each other about something that can be really isolating. There's not many people that can understand when you say, my 15-year-old is living in a camp. I haven't seen him in a couple weeks, and I'm terrified. So it really helps with that. And yeah, and then 4D has an APG that our kids are really excited about. So I'm going to do the downer slide from the Lund report. They came out and talked with us, and I don't know if other people saw this, and I would agree with Annalise that, you know, calling this out, it just means we have a lot of work to do. So the one part of this that I find really troubling is the last piece on there, the CADC to secondary school student ratio. So that's the amount of drug counselors that are in the school. That ratio is 1 drug counselor for every 2,400 secondary school students. That's insane. Sorry, that's troubling. Sorry about that. And then, you know, when the Lund report came out, there was only the one recovery high school, Harmony Academy. There's now Rivercrest, which is opening in Portland. And Mike and Marianne Dyer over there are trying to start a recovery high school down here in Lane County, and that's getting a lot of momentum. So, woo! And then just, you know, youth detox facilities. I think we're up to 1 now, where there were 0 on this slide. So things are happening. Yeah, and then, you know, just looking at the number of adolescent treatment beds going down, that's troubling too. So there is a lot of work to be done, and here we are to do it. So I would like to just call out that youth and young adults have historically been left out of the conversation on their own services, and services have tended to replicate adult services and figure that's good enough for young people, and it just hasn't worked out. And so SAMHSA confirms that youth and young adults who use substances need interventions that address them as whole people with different developmental needs than adults. And one of those developmental needs that I like to share about that I think people overlook when they're trying to work with adolescents is scare tactics don't work with adolescents. It just, developmentally, they are impervious to danger. And so trying to scare them with what's gonna happen to them if they keep using typically doesn't work. So, and then just, this is a picture of two of our students. And I just wanted to go through like the orientation that we have as a recovery high school. It's just that young people are experts on their own lives. They are able to tell you what the perceived benefits of drug use are, what they want out of stopping, what their motivations are. And if we listen to them, then we can work with them to get where they want to get. They need brave spaces where they're seen, known, and loved. They need strong, consistent adults to show up for them. This one gets really hard because I just want to name it that people that work in this field have been exhausted. I mean, just absolutely exhausted. And so there's that balance of, we find these adults that are on fire for young people, and then sometimes just the aftermath of the pandemic, being run ragged in social services and the recovery, it just catches up with them and they just can't. And it's really hard to have that turnover happen for our young people. And I mean, the good thing about that, in a way, is that it prepares young people for being part of real recovery communities, because I know and I'm confident that I can move anywhere in this country and I can find a recovery community like that. And maybe it won't be perfect at first, but I can go and try out different recovery communities and I'll find a place that I belong, and I really believe that. And so when young people have to adapt to turnover in staff, I think it lets them know there's multiple adults that are helping them out and that are gonna be there for them, and that there will always be more. There's never gonna be a shortage of people that are there for you, and I just believe that. Young people need spaces where they can express themselves and explore their identities. They can have strong flavors. They can be one person one day, one person the next day, and we're gonna be like, cool, glad to see you. And they need non-institutional feeling spaces. So they don't want to walk into a place and feel like they're in treatment. They want to walk into a place and feel like they can settle in, eat a cup of noodles, relax, do whatever. And they do build their own culture when they're given healthy parameters. One of the shifts that we've seen at the school is, that first year when the kids came in all wild and they didn't have role models yet, they also thought of it as snitching, which isn't surprising, to let somebody know, like, I think this other student has drugs on them. Now it's like, I feel like, with one exception, I feel like people let us know. They know that accountability is an act of love and care. They know that they've chosen to build this like fragile thing that, it's powerful and fragile at the same time. And so they'll really call it out if people are being disrespectful to that community. And that's a shift. And I say one exception because with cannabis, they are really hesitant. There's this, I could talk about this for 45 minutes, so I won't. But I think there's this belief, and it's kind of reinforced sometimes in treatment, that it's a kindness to have somebody be able to smoke weed to deal with their problems. And the kids get that message a lot. And so it creates this strange push and pull, I guess is the safest way to say it. And finally, we believe that young people recover in community. I also just want to call out that one of the beauties of recovery high schools is that they aren't the same all over the country, and they wouldn't be the same all over Oregon. So Lane County recovery high schools are going to have a different feel because they're going to serve a slightly different community or a really different community than a school in Portland. And our community is really different than my friend Dan's school in Florida. It's different than my friend Roger's school in Boston because the communities around them are different. And this is a quote that I like to put in slideshows. Adolescents of diverse racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds vary in risk factors, patterns, rates, and consequences of substance use. And I like that because it's really concise. There's going to be differences in those things, and that means that we need to have differences in the mentors that we hire. We need to have differences in the way that programs are set up so there's not cultural mismatch. We need to be aware that wherever the school is, it needs to serve the youth that are around that school. And so just, I think I have like 8 minutes left. Harmony students, they are all very different from each other, but it's rare to have a student come in that isn't known by at least one of the kids in there. So there's usually they come through for a tour and somebody goes running over and hugs them and is like, oh my God, I can't believe you're here. I'm so happy you're here. But we accept any youth age 14 to 21 who wants to finish high school, build a community of healthy peers, and work on their recovery. So if somebody says in the interview, I'm going to keep smoking weed, we go, well, this isn't really necessarily the right place for you. So are you willing to stop smoking weed while you were enrolled in this school and see if your life gets better? And if they're like, no, I'm going to smoke weed, we're like, then that's not really what we're doing here, because that becomes corrosive to the rest of the community. But if we have a student that's like, man, I am sure that this drug, and this drug are ruining my life, I'm not sure about weed, we go, okay, do you want to work on that? And if they're like, yeah, I want to work on that, then we'll work on that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be weed. It could be alcohol that they're ambivalent about. It could be acid that they're ambivalent about. There's a lot of students that are like, well, hallucinogens are just spiritual, and I want to keep working on my spirituality there. And we go, okay, are you willing to talk about that and work on that? Okay. This is a picture. This was, I know it's not a great picture, but this was our prom. This was the first year that we had sober prom. And I really felt like that was a mark of having arrived to have a sober prom, because the kids were so excited about it. And this year they want to invite more people to the prom. It's a big deal to hit the typical milestone. So when our kids are getting their licenses, they're getting their jobs, they're getting good grades, they're having a prom, they're going out with their friends. I mean, these are big deals. These are things that they didn't think that they'd see. And so just to conclude, programs work for young people when we ask them to be part of programmatic design. When we provide ongoing training to our staff on adolescent-specific needs. I think I overwhelmed our new staff this past couple weeks with training, but I really think it's really different to work with adolescents than it is to work with adults. Make sure that young adults can access in-person services, engage our kids through things like the arts. Don't pathologize drug use or drug behaviors. We let the kids know we have no opinion on people who use drugs outside of the school or people who use drugs and they're making that choice and they're not enrolled in a recovery high school. We don't have an opinion on that. People get to make the choices that they get to make in life, and I think that's really important. And then assist young people in building a support network and an alternative group of healthy peers so that they can keep going. And so we also have dogs at the school a lot, which makes me really happy. And then finally, House Bill 2767 passed, and that means that there's going to be the possibility of multiple schools opening each biennium across the state of Oregon. So we're looking at, we're looking at 9 schools. We're looking at the state supporting those schools. We're looking at this moving away from being something that just needs to constantly be running up the down escalator, is what it feels like sometimes, to something where there's a big support network and we can share resources and we can share training and we can share data and really look at how we can move the needle for young people around here. So on that note, I would just like to say that you can call and schedule a visit to Harmony if you would like to. You can call and ask questions, but also the students are used to people coming and visiting, and they'll just keep going with their day. We've had all sorts of awesome visitors. You can also invite students to speak. It's beneficial for the students to do it. They enjoy it. They're good at it. And I think it's just, they'll show up for it. They don't really care. We'll drive them to where they need to be. And so Dante is the connection for that, and it's the main school number. And then I put the ARS website and the Harmony website up. So that, yeah, if you want to reach out and find more information, you can. And I just want to say thank you for everybody for listening. I hope that was helpful in picturing how we can get to our kids sooner, intervene sooner, and have them just have this lovely, joyful, loving experience where they create something, it's something lasting, it puts them back into the community, it puts them back into the running to achieve whatever goals they want and to live their dreams and to pull other young people up with them. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Sharon. We have a few minutes for some questions. Anybody have any questions for Sharon? She walked away. It's okay. We maybe have some any questions?
I'll take questions.
That's okay.
Sorry.
There's a question.
Okay.
Go ahead. Here. Wait for the microphone.
So with your slide that was talking about like the CADCs in the school, I work in the schools. Bridgeway has a contract with the schools for Salem Kaiser. And I just started this year. And when I first got on, so I have 4 schools, I only had 32 students on my caseload. And by 3 months, I had over 100. And it was absolutely insane. We have 7 of us in there, and plus we have a caseload on top of it. And so reading that, like, holy crap, that's totally true. I go back to the schools next week, and I'm super excited. And then another thing you were saying about the detox, I just did a tour at Caitlin's house. Do you guys know what Caitlin's house is? Yes, yes. And they need referrals. So it's a detox, and they even detox from cannabis, which was really interesting. And they take... Yes, I think I might have one. I think I would have to double look, but it's an amazing. They're also, like as she was saying, they'll be at Punks in the Park too. If you guys need information too, I have flyers for that. I don't want to take any more of that time on that, but I think it's so incredibly important. Like all of us in here and being like, what are we even doing here? Like this is the reason. Like what she is doing is working, and there's a reason why it's working. And you like cracked the formula. Like you're like Einstein of our generation of people. So. I appreciate you so much. I was really excited to see you on here. I'm like, I know her. So yeah, I just think it's really incredibly important. So thank you so much for speaking.
Thank you.
I also work in the schools, so shout out to the school-based people. First, just a comment. It was really validating to see how many youth on your list are using cannabis as their drug of choice. As somebody who's kind of new to substance use disorder, I think I overlook cannabis. Like being in Eugene, it's so normalized here, but the use is so prevalent, and it's really difficult to treat as a clinician with no like experience in it. And with that, I was curious if you tell us a little bit more about the timeline for the Lane County Recovery High School.
You might pass the mic back to Mike and Marianne back there if they feel comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon, for your great presentation. My wife, Marianne, and Josh Gottlieb and Emily Tanner Smith, and I've been working on this now for, probably 16 months. And we have been working with the Lane ESD and had a meeting about 3 weeks ago with the 16 school districts in Lane County at the ESD headquarters. And where we are now is when House Bill 2767 passed, which will provide funding, oversight, and a structure for recovery high schools in Oregon. Lane ESD decided we would partner with them and the 16 school districts. And right now we're waiting for the state to issue the RFP, excuse me, to be recognized as a recovery high school. Once that's issued, we will work with Lane ESD prepare that. They have a grant writer, and we will be preparing that with ESD to be recognized, hopefully, in this 23-25 biennium. And I guess our optimistic view is that we would like to open a year from now, in September of 2024.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. So if anybody has a building they'd like to donate, we'd love to have that. But and I also need to shout out to Sharon and Pam Pierce for the help they've given us, the guidance, because they've created this wheel before, and so they've really given us a lot of information and guidance to move forward. And we started this, like I said, 16 months ago and knew nothing about the educational system. We knew about recovery, and that's about it. And we're really excited with what we've done. So we're going to get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Hey, can I add something really quickly? So I appreciate the support, but I also want to say there were 40 years of people running recovery schools before me, and those people around the country are so willing and happy to share any materials. So if people are thinking that their community could use a recovery high school and they feel like it would be too heavy of a lift, it's a pretty heavy lift, and there are people all over the country that will get on a call with you and just help you problem solve. They'll share their enrollment materials with you. They'll share materials with you so you don't have to recreate it every single time. I just wanted to say that. Yeah. No more questions? Okay, thank you guys.